I feel like both will suffer at various points in the month, week, year, quarter, where you needed to be home with family doing something important, but you weren't. And you needed to be at work, but you weren't because you needed to be home.
Okay. Well, what a treat it is for me today. I'm here with a couple of friends to talk about a book and the life of one of the three of us. And that one is Alan Guarino. Alan's a terrific guy who I was introduced to several years ago by a mutual friend, Catherine Oliver. And Alan, you've had a terrific career, and we're going to explore that today, but I can't do that just one-on-one. You just overwhelmed me with all your greatness. So I invited our mutual friend, Ron Moultrie, to join us. Here we have two people who've had extraordinary careers. You've done your public service early in your career and throughout, Alan. And Ron, it was the whole of your career that you worked. You spent 8 years in the Air Force, as I recall. You worked at the Central Intelligence Agency for decades. Then you went to the NSA. Then when you came into civilian life, you were drawn back in to government service. I remember by the Secretary of Navy asked you to convene a commission to review the readiness of the fighting force in the Navy, and you did a terrific job on that. And then, as you had your feet firmly planted in the private sector, the Biden administration asked you to join the Defense Department as the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. And I know during that time that it was all-consuming, and it was an exhausting 3 years. And we can't forget, of course, it was at the very beginning of the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. So you must have been one of the busiest dudes on the planet. And Alan, I'm thrilled that we get to join forces today and talk to you about your new book, uh, which is called the Greatness Code. And reading about your CV again. I have to believe that a good part of your thinking about greatness, about codes, about performance, uh, doesn't just come from your decades of advising CEOs and Fortune 500 company boards and building your own practice at Korn Ferry, becoming the vice chairman there, creating the succession planning institute there at Korn Ferry. But I would have to believe it probably started with your education in college, where you went to the military academy and then served leading men in the Army for 5 years after that service. Is that where it all began for you?
Well, Jim, actually think it began with an immigrant dad who completed the eighth grade as his highest level of education, but who was a brilliant person. In his era, access to education was not available for many immigrants in the 1930s and 40s. So um, I think my parents gave me a great grounding, and then two older sisters was very valuable. And so I think the foundation for seeking to achieve was laid there. But seeking to achieve and then finding ways to achieve and having opportunities to achieve are different things. And absolutely, I tell people every day when I have the opportunity that West Point and the military turned a pretty, sort of know it all, self assured 17-year-old into somebody who realized there was a lot to learn in the world very quickly. It was a great experience, and the military is known for that. And so I think that combination is what got me started on trying to achieve and trying to do it in a way that that was, let's say, productive in helping others.
Okay. So the question on the table that I one of the questions I took away from the book is the term grit. I think I understand what it means, but I'm sure there's nuances among the three of us in terms of our interpretation. But Ron, starting with you, what's your take on the role that grit plays in our lives and the successes we have and our brands, as Alan just mentioned, our brands are important, and especially if you want to be achieve greatness in any area? What role does grit play?
Yeah, Jim, thanks for inviting me to participate in this interview with you and Alan today. It's really an honor to be here. You know, when I was talking to Alan about his book, and he was walking me through some of the attributes and characteristics of people that he was going to put in the book. We talked specifically about grit and what that meant, and I started talking about my background and my upbringing, if you will. Um, the son of a military individual who entered a segregated military back in the 1940s. And my father's great grandfather had been a Buffalo soldier serving in 1865. So, we're a family that's seen a lot over the last 150, 160 years. That means a lot of adversity, a lot of failure, and some triumph along the way. But what grit starts to do, you learn from these challenges that you have. They actually make you stronger. They make you more resilient. They make you more determined, if you will, to pursue a goal, regardless of the adversity that you're going to face. And so, what I took away from it was when I read through Alan's book, I looked at all these individuals who had faced all these challenges in their life, and none of them started with immediate success. They all had things that they tried to do, they didn't work out, they were rejected, they had to try and try again, but they never were defeated. And grit is starting to, that is when you start to develop that Teflon layer, I'll call it, of a coating that says no matter how bad things are, I'm going to continue to keep trying for a goal because I know it's something that is possible to do. But more importantly, it's something that's going to be important not just to me, but to others if I achieve my goal. So it's all those lessons and that veneer that you develop after you had failure after failure after failure, but getting back up again and actually being persistent, having that stamina until you perceive or until you achieve that goal. So that's how I determined I was going to be in terms of my grit, and I think that's what I took away from Alan's book. But I'll let Alan, who wrote the book himself, define it in the ways that he was thinking about it.
Sure. Well, um, first, the book literally was written by Angela Duckworth. The book Grit, and she did a Duckworth did an incredible job years ago on that, and has continued to carry that message. And by the way, coincidentally, one of the places she studied was West Point as an institution, and what people needed to do to persevere and get through that. But I think what I've done in terms of grit, to answer the question, Jim, around what is it, it's just expanded it to, I would say, a little more granularity. So I call it script. I'm an engineer, so I have to use letters. So the greatness code formula is SCRPP plus SC equals greatness. Now, I did a presentation when we did the book launch, and I said just that. And I said, and by the way, if you want to know what those mean, you have to buy the book. But in this case, I'm going to tell you. So script is stamina, courage, resilience, persistence, and passion. Others would say those words embody the true spectrum of what is grit, right? So people who possess those qualities, all people do, um, can use them. And if they apply them diligently, they will achieve a certain level of greatness. Let's say they'll get to here. And by the way, those qualities are like muscles, and they're developed over time. Now, this book is written in the context of early career, mid career, peak career, and then coming down the mountain post the peak of a career, which to me is another peak. Jim, you're a perfect example of that. And Ron, you're starting that for sure because of your pivot now into working in the public sector, from your peak in the biggest undersecretary job in the Defense Department. Not too many people could say they had 100,000 people working for them, Ron. So anyway, so that is the first piece
Or,
of the greatness
or
code.
Alan, could they say that they were on the cover this month of Army Navy magazine, having been their monthly keynote speaker? A
Right.
few friends said, "Isn't that your buddy I saw on the cover?" I said, "Yes,
That's
it
right.
is."
Yeah. I was proud to see that. And I always tell people, and by the way, yeah, he had 100,000 people. And oh, this thing called the National Security Agency, that was one of those things that reported to him. Anyway, so enough about Ron. um, the SC is the other key component. So we'll get into it maybe later, but
That SC surprised me. So I'm really excited and interested to hear how you give definition.
great people working really hard, doing super work, couldn't understand why they weren't getting promoted, weren't getting raises, weren't getting recognized. And what they learned was their work doesn't speak for itself. The reality is, when you're in an ecosystem, an organization, an institution, you need those 5 qualities and you need to apply them. And that probably means you're going to be doing great work and you're going to be sticking with challenges. But if you don't have a group of people around you, social capital, the network, mentors, people who set you straight, people
Tell
who
you the
speak
truth.
who speak well of you when you're not in the room, who tell you the truth, who, you know, pick you up when you're having a tough time. Um, that plus script is how people get here, the highest level. So both pieces of the formula are required. Carla Harris is in the book, brilliant vice chairman at Morgan Stanley. She wrote a book on this topic because she was told 40 years ago, 30 years ago, by a brilliant mentor when she was just starting at Morgan Stanley, that indeed your work doesn't speak for itself, and you need to get out and make sure you have a bunch of people around you that are part of the team, Carla, that are going to help you achieve. And by the way, you do that by making it a two-way street. It's not about people helping you. It's about you having a collective around you who help one another. And ultimately, that gives you a real network of genuine social capital.
Make this spring one to remember. Have friends over for a Sunday brunch or celebrate special occasions like birthdays and baby showers with delicious food and gourmet gifts.
Alan, having worked with in the business community and the not-for-profit world, and by the way, I bet you agree, there are so many great leaders in the not-for-profit world who don't get the recognition they deserve because we tend to focus only on the for-profit world. But what separates that top 1% from all the rest of us?
The top 1% have an incredible capacity to know what to do when opportunity knocks. And I'd broaden it to 5%, maybe, so people could have a little more hope. Uh, but but the reality is that there are so many folks who will watch an individual and say, "Wow, she is super lucky. Everything she touches turns to gold." Well, you know what? It's just that she can see opportunity better than others and therefore has more opportunities to win and succeed and therefore looks quite lucky. But those same opportunities passed by hundreds of other people who didn't see them and therefore didn't know what to do when that opportunity was knocking. And as a result, they end up, let's say, not going as far as they had hoped, um, or at a minimum, let's say, being envious or admiring people who seem to have that knack. But when you talk about leaders, we can expand this, even more widely, and that's, what makes great leaders today. And I think even in the old days when leadership was highly directive and hierarchical, is still the ability to inspire and galvanize people on a journey to someplace that the leader wants them to go.
Well, in the military, you guys talk all about your code of conduct, your code of ethics, and it seems to me that in leadership, in those life and death situations, in those really dramatic situations, it's essential that the people around you understand, have a sense of or a definite knowledge of what your code is. So when you're asked to do something beyond your leadership capability, whether it's anointed or by circumstance, uh, essential for leadership and performance is trust. Trust that I know how he's going to perform. Trust that I know what his motivations are. Trust that I know she has a sense of what the real mission is. So trust and determination. In the business world, is that the same, or can it be a little more squirrely?
I think that trust is the absolute foundation on which a leader can then do everything else. So, how can you inspire people who don't trust you? How can you motivate people who don't trust you? How can you ask for people's loyalty who don't trust you? And on and on and on. So, trust to me is the the golden ticket, the absolute foundation. And look, my partner Kevin Cashman's written on this for many years. Brilliant book called Leadership from the Inside Out, and he starts with the fact that leaders have to be genuine and authentic, and in order to be that, and this is where it gets hard, Jim, you have to have massive self awareness. People are not inclined to seek self awareness. Who wants to know all of those things that you really need to work on? And so many of us rationalize them away. We get feedback and we say, well, that person's wrong. That's not me. Guess what? It probably is you. And if you work on those things, then you will be better. So, bottom line, trust is the foundation for everything, because at the end of the day, very little do we do in this world without relationships, and you can't have a relationship without trust.
But, Alan, we know people who have been very, very successful in business who are not the least bit trustworthy.
Absolutely. Eventually, they get found out. Sadly, we know people that have been Fortune X CEOs who still haven't been found out. It's not a perfect system, Jim, but if you want to play the odds,
Okay.
if you
So
want to
it's
play the odds,
so it's not absolute. It's people can get there in spite of their flaws, but that doesn't make them great. Makes them
oh,
maybe successful, but not great.
may have achieved a certain level of accomplishment by title and power, but may not have followership, may not have a greatness that others feel is great. And oh, by the way, most of those folks have damage in other parts of their lives. So we can't look at them as simply, wow, they weren't all that trustworthy. They were quite Machiavellian, and look, they made it. Oh, they made it, but maybe they have real issues around their family and friends and other, sadly, other components of their life that aren't so pretty.
Alan, listening to you, I was thinking about leaders, and you talked about your time at West Point, and I was thinking about the military trying to groom and grow leaders, and some say that leadership is innate. It's just natural that you either are a leader or you're not a leader, and some say no, you have to learn leadership. What's your take on that? I mean, we're talking to somebody, Jim McCann, who obviously is a born leader, I think. He does all those things that they weren't teaching, decades and decades ago, and he's built a very successful company over 50 years. But what's your take on leadership? Is it something that somebody naturally comes by, or is it something that someone really has to learn and has to be taught?
Yeah. So leadership is absolutely something that can and is taught, but it's not unlike sports. If you have those important traits that make great leaders great, and you develop those traits effectively, then you will be the greatest possible leader that could be, because you have both the traits and you put the work in. If you have less of those traits and you work your tail off, you may only get to be a good leader because you just didn't have all the DNA needed to be that ultimate great leader. And so again, it's like sports. You might be able to be a great Division II athlete, but you're never going to be a pro because there are limitations. But to say it's binary and either you are born to be a leader or not, I don't agree with. But clearly, some people, like in almost every other vocation, right? There are many vocations besides being a leader. The aptitude you start with is going to enable you to go to a certain distance.
I introduced a topic early on when we first started, and I'll come back to in a minute. But it seems to me that this is a book that I would want to gift to my kids and other people young in their careers to give them really important thought and roadmap to how they can work that muscle. Be conscious of their behaviors and their approach to things so as to make the best of the gifts that they've been given or the gifts that they weren't given so that they can be better in their lives as leaders in their family, as leaders in their community, in their social world, and of course in their business world. Is that your intent, Alan, was to give people a primer on how to develop that muscle?
Absolutely, Jim. I didn't want to overlook the foundational years of a career. And to be frank, let's face it, today, for many, many, many people, their career and their life are directly linked. People that are not achieving at the level they aspire to in their career are less happy with their overall life, even if the other things in their life are going well. So you can't disconnect them. And yes, I believe that people hold themselves back in the early stages of their career by not realizing they own much of their opportunity to achieve. And so they default to blaming other people. My boss wasn't fair. My boss played favorites. And by the way, those things do happen. But what I try to encourage people to do, and I was blessed to learn this early, and I actually don't know how I learned it, but I've lived with it. Um, and that was when something went wrong, the first thing I said was, how did I screw this up? What part did I play in this not happening the way it needed to? And after I got through that, and I tried to get through it pretty quickly, I was figuring out what else went wrong that was beyond my control. But without doing the first, you really have a hard time growing because most time when things don't happen the way they need to happen, you are part of the problem. So yes, part one of the book is early career, and it talks about the fact that there is a journey here. It is a marathon, not a sprint. It talks about celebrating little victories. You can't wait till you finish the race to celebrate because it's a long race. That will allow you to be persistent. That will allow you to be resilient. So that's how you work those muscles to get them stronger. So absolutely, but I also wanted to make it clear that at every phase of a career, these key components are directly applicable. I talk about James Gorman, right? James Gorman, 2008, the CEO of Morgan Stanley. He was certainly not early career, right? James was at the peak. But in order for him to do what he did, taking Morgan Stanley from, the ashes to be the phoenix to the powerhouse it is, he needed to exercise all 5 Qs in script, and he needed social capital of professionals around him, both inside Morgan Stanley and outside, that were part of the success formula. And then I talk about Reshma Swahani, who, by the way, just today or yesterday was announced as one of Time Magazine's Women of the Year, and she's in our book. And she was in her, late 20s and graduated from college during the financial crisis. Got her law degree, couldn't get a job, and had the moxie to run for Congress at a 20 something and didn't work. Got her butt kicked, as she says, and went on to start Girls Who Code and then Moms First. I mean, so whether you're a 20 something, a 30 something, or a 50 or 60 something, the Greatness Code formula is a formula you can apply on your journey towards whatever it is you're striving to achieve.
Alan, I got to get you to come back to Reshma and talk about when you asked her in the book about the greatness objective and the quote she gave you. I just think it just rings.
Yeah, the quote's great, but I don't have it memorized, Jim.
I have it in front of me, and I've come
Perfect.
back to it several times in the last week or so prepping for our discussion today. She said, if you want to live a great life, don't chase perfection. Chase purpose. Be brave enough to fail, be stubborn enough to try again, and build a community strong enough to carry you through. It comes back to that social capital you talked about, and you mentioned relationships along the way. That it just, I think that's so misunderstood or so underappreciated in our journey, is to have the right people around us. And as you said earlier on, it's not just to blow smoke your way, it's to tell you the truth, it's to be there for you, and someone you've been there for as well.
No question about it. Jim, if you see the book behind me, the cover I designed myself, actually.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I'm not an artist, so um, Wiley took my concept and turned it into a proper piece of art. And I will give a nod to my friend Arthur Brooks. I loved the cover of Strength to Strength with the big, powerful trees, and I said I want that feeling. So, as we all do, we're influenced, and then we come up with our own vision. But the
Like
book,
you, Arthur Brooks is someone who's recently had a big impact on my life.
Arthur's great, and of course, he's a big part of the epilogue.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed, talking with him during the book. The trail behind me here, the trail in that woods is the journey, right? That's the metaphor for the journey that you're on. The light is the greatness you're trying to achieve. And by the way, we have multiple greatness objectives at any given time. Want to
Yes.
be a great dad or mom, want to be or parent, partner, community leader, boss, whatever. So we're not just going after one greatness objective. But the cool thing is that those trees are the social capital. There are the people, those strong people, a group of people on either side of the trail that keep you on the trail. That's the metaphor that that book cover is designed to convey. I never told you that, Ron, but that's the greatness code formula, book cover to bring together all the key components: the journey, the objective, and the people around you that keep you on the trail.
I'm going to go down a hole on one of those elements because we just had this conversation earlier this week. I was with two young men and we got into a conversation. They're young parents, and we got into a conversation about time in their career versus being home with their kids, being involved with their kids for sports. And it's something I see people, particularly fathers, in my experience, really, really struggle with. Well, if I'm not there for all my kids' games, then that hurts my career. And so if I am there, it hurts my career. And they're always, how do I find that balance? So you get Father of the Year because you never missed a practice, you never missed a game, you took them out for everything, but you didn't spend enough time on your career. So you were actually negligent in some aspect of your parenting responsibilities because you set a standard for what kind of a lifestyle you want your kids to have, but you're not allowing yourself to get that because your balance is off. I, you guys in your careers coaching people, particularly young people, must have dealt with that question a lot.
Yeah, it's it's a badge of honor. I think that people wear that. I tell them it's probably the most resolute failure that I see, that people say, "Well, look, I spend all my time at work. I never go home. I work weekends, and I'm I'm the only car in the parking lot on late at night or on Saturdays and Sundays." And I
And my
tell,
marriage isn't so good.
yeah, and by the way, right? And what I've said to them is, look, it all starts with family. It really does. That you have to have not only that social network at work, but you have to have that family dynamic. You have to have people that you can go to when the well gets a little dry at work, because you are going to have days at work where it's not going to be 100% what you want it to be. Where, as Alan said, you're going to finally come across somebody who's going to tell you that, you're not quite hitting the mark here, that you are not as great as what you think you are. And on those days, you really need to be able to go back and bounce those things off of people who will still put their arms around you at the end of the day and say, regardless of what that person said, you still mean the world to me. And so I try to ensure that I give that coaching. I try to ensure that, Jim, as you just said, that mentoring to young people early on, to say, getting to where you want to be does not mean that you have to neglect those things that are most important to you or that are the closest to you. You need to be able to find time for all of them. And if you do that, that will actually contribute to your success because you'll start looking at the people who work with you and you'll start thinking about their needs because they're also starting families and they'll need to have time to go when the son is not feeling well or the daughter needs you there or when the wife has something that she wants your support on just as your coworkers will. So the way I always looked at it was your work is a kind of a family, and your family is a microcosm of your work, right? And if you do well at work, then you should be able to do well at your family, and vice versa, if you will. So that's the way that I've approached it. I've seen people, as Alan say, who were successful in one and awful in the other. And the challenge with them is that when their career is over, they got to go back to the other, right? And they haven't been that good spouse, or they haven't been that good father or that good mother, and it's become, a challenge for them because they said, "Well, my work career
Or a good
is
son or daughter.
yeah, and now what do I do? Now I got to go back to these people who it wasn't really there for." So, Alan, you probably experienced that too. What's your take on that?
Well, there's no secret sauce to this one. People like Barbara Corcoran have talked about this, and her incredible career, and realized I think her line was something to the effect that I gave up a long time ago, believing you could do it all. So I lean towards where you lean, Ron. I feel like both will suffer at various points in the month, week, year, quarter, where you needed to be home with family doing something important, but you weren't, and you needed to be at work, but you weren't because you needed to be home. And so, you have to do your best to make the smart calls. If you're adept at it, you do both adequately well, and one suffers a bit for the other, but there's enough of a balance that they're both satisfied with you, right? But you know, if you have to pick a lane, to me, you know, I guess it's easy to say later on in your career, but you know, people always say you don't regret what you did, that you regret what you didn't do. And I would guess that more regrets are what people didn't do with family and friends than what they didn't do with their career. I don't people regret that they didn't go to that conference, but they do regret that they didn't, spend enough time with their mom while she was alive. I honestly wrote this book to help anybody in the world who was trying to achieve anything. So there you go. It's probably 99.9% of the population that is mature enough, let's say in their teens or more, to process the information and use it. And as I said, my wasn't easy, with being what I do in my industry to write a dedication that said this book is dedicated to the people who work for toxic bosses who suck the oxygen out of the room. Now, obviously, it goes on to be a little lighter after that, and it's also to the great leaders that deserve to be appreciated. But I wanted to help people, and what I landed on was when it was over, I said, "Wow, I can help everybody." I said, "Arthur Brooks is the happiness guy. I think I could be the greatness guy."
And indeed, I think you're the greatness guy, Alan. And I think you did a great job writing this book and researching it and laying it out. And I think the acronyms you give us are such a great handle. I can't let you go though without saying one last thing about. We've gone this whole conversation without mentioning AI, and I know you have a strong point of view about greatness, leadership, and particularly talent, and how that's going to be the talent AI conflict. Who wins out?
I don't know if
Indeed,
that answers the question, but
it does. Ron, I think you'd agree that there are some interesting times ahead. Workplaces are going to be disrupted. I suspect Alan and the team at Korn Ferry will be playing a real thought leadership role there. But it also says to me, all the more reason to read the Greatness Code, because we're all going to have to make decisions and influence direction as AI changes everything about our world. And if you don't have a code, you're going to be out there without a map.
Jim, I couldn't have said it better. And there's the part in the book where I say, even in the land of AI, these human attributes are going to even be more important.
More important.
Yeah, Jim, I'll just add, look, I've worked in organizations that I've said to you, I think, almost 10 years ago now, we're doing things with machine learning and AI years ago, right? I would say to those people who were developing things 10, 15 years ago via supercomputers and other things, they need to read this book. It's really a great book, and it's going to help them do what they do even better. And hopefully, it's going to put some of those social guards and what I would call guardrails, protective rails around AI. So it will make our lives better, but make it better for the masses, not just for the gifted few. So it's a great book, Jim. I'm glad to know Alan, and equally glad to know you and to be on this call today. So thank you so very much.
Well, thanks, Ron, for co-hosting with me. Alan, congratulations on the book. It's a must-read. It's terrific. I think it's all the more important in a fast-paced, changing world that's only going to change faster, to understand how you can possibly strive for greatness and what code you develop for yourself and the people around you. Thank you, Alan.
Jim, I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And I do hope people read it. It was great to be a USA Today bestseller. So somebody's read it.
That's terrific. Congratulations. Thanks, fellas. On to the Greatness Code.
Bye, Jim. Take care, Ron.
Peace out.